welcome to the story of Spring Hills Part 4 today. Eve is working on Trunk or Treat, so we are doing Trunk or Treat tomorrow night. This is being filmed on recorded and filmed on Thursday prior. So tomorrow's the 30th. So we got Trunk or Treat this weekend, which is great that we're able to do it because I wasn't sure that was going to happen, right?
Yeah, a lot of kids are happy right now.
Yeah, my kids are stoked.
Yeah.
My kids are so stoked that they are doing one costume for us running a trunk, and then a different costume to go through Trunk or Treat. So they're
I'll
really
have to come
embracing.
to your trunk and see.
They're really I'm going to be Winnie the Pooh, so you won't be able to miss.
Nothing scary this
year.
year.
No, not for me. No. All right, so we're picking up right after we talked a lot last week about the acquisition of this property, what happened when we first got onto the property. So we're around 2011, is that right?
Yeah.
What was the biggest change that you noticed within the church now having a permanent home, both as like the church family and your leadership as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
That actually came from Judy Bruner.
That's a very good question.
That's a Judy Bruner question.
Yeah.
I'll give her credit for that.
You know, when we did the capital campaign to, build it out and all that kind of thing, even when we got our bond program, they would say, okay, when you get into your new facility, it's going to really grow because it's permanent and people have a good feeling about it. And churches will grow when
consistency,
all that, And I was kind of like, okay, well, hope so, Well, the good news is that's exactly what happened. I mean, our church, from the time we moved in, within really 2 years, had close to doubled, actually over doubled.
That's crazy.
We added services, the 8:15 service, and
which everybody loves.
Yes, we had the evening service, the 5:30 on Saturday, but plus we doubled our capacity here.
Yeah.
So but the church grew really fast right away, and for me and my leadership, I just, it was an interesting dynamic. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I know that. I was exhausted because just getting here, from the time we bought it, just buying it was crazy. Those who have heard the story from the first story and second story podcast, but buying it and then getting the use permit and then building out, I was just sort of exhausted. I probably should have taken a little time.
7 years from the first offer to actually getting on.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
I probably should have taken some time off. I actually encouraged another pastor. I think I might have mentioned this, but I encouraged him. They just did a build out, and I said, hey, once you get in, I would take some time off.
At least a few weeks.
But you can't because you're on a roll now.
You're excited and you don't want to miss out on it.
Church is growing, and so we. It forced us to think about, well, how do you pastor and shepherd a church of 1,500 and growing as opposed to a church of 500-600? I mean, it's like, what do you do now? And so those were good years in terms of rethinking our whole strategy.
Was the staff still pretty small?
Yeah, the staff was small. I mean, we've always been lean and mean, I would say. And for our staff, it ended up, I'd say, creating a little tension because each staff member was having to think almost double.
Right.
And how do we take care of people? How do we multiply ministry? And we were used to, as I say, a church of 500, but now you're a church upwards of 1,500 and growing. Everybody on the staff has to think differently. So I remember staff meetings where I would bring these articles and say, this is how we need to think about the staff.
You still do that. Yeah. You send us something. Hey, everybody read this. Let's chat about it.
Yeah, let's chat about it. And back then it was like, okay, we're no longer a small church or a medium-sized church. We're almost a mega church.
I mean, technically isn't over 1,500 a mega church? Isn't that
no,
kind of the
it kicks in at like 2,000, I think was the latest. Then you're a mega church.
Then you're a mega church. Okay.
So we've always wanted to be a mega church. Those days may be past, who knows? But and some staff, as they came up, it was a kind of a tough adjustment, to be honest. It was, and then I didn't always communicate it as well. I was feeling a little pressure.
Sure.
Should have been just thankful, right?
Right.
Look, God, what you're doing, and people are coming to know Christ, and you're really doing an amazing thing. But I almost felt a little pressure to to make sure that we're doing it right and all that.
Do you think that a lot of times, I mean, I've noticed this even when we'll have texts go around with the staff, a big event coming up, things are going well, and everybody's just like, just be in prayer for warfare because it's gonna happen. So things are going well. You've got some warfare tension. What else? What are you experiencing with that as a leader? Are you getting stressed out about it? Or are you?
Yeah, I would say exactly. I'd say, and we had some spiritual warfare hit the church early on, and part of it, I felt spiritual warfare for me in my fatigue.
Uh-huh.
And I would say that to anybody listening to this podcast or watching, that when you're fatigued and tired and sort of run down, it does make you more vulnerable. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic thing is people just want relief, they're tired. So I was feeling some fatigue, and I think it was opening me up to some spiritual warfare. And then also within the church, the change, it's a big change. All right. We're in a different location and we're twice as big as we were.
And change isn't going to be for everybody. It's not going to, if it's changing, there's going to be some people that this is great. Some people like, hey, this just isn't the right fit anymore.
And it happens so fast.
Yeah.
The growth happens so fast.
Yeah. That's really fast.
So you got changes that brings out that's an opening for the devil. If anybody's watching in this podcast and they're going through some big changes, people don't always react to the changes the same way. I mean, for the most part, I'd say people were very excited and we did really, it was very, very, very good.
Yeah.
But we ended up having some staff, great staff, good staff, leave, felt a call to start another church in town. And that was a difficult time for us. It looking back now, I feel like it was the Lord. It was him moving them out. And
hey, there's another church in town.
Another
in a place
church.
That's great.
Exactly. Another church in town. At the time, it was a difficult transition, I'd say. For those who left, it was difficult. And it was difficult for me and for people in the church. But again, I think that came out of some of moving over here and things changing and all of that. The good news is that I would say the good news is a church has been born. I'm close to those staff members where, all is good. God is working. And
I mean, I've seen that happen in my hometown where people have left churches and then they won't have anything to do with, like they won't talk to them. They won't just stay away from it. And it's just kind of like, guys, we can figure this out. We can be a team here and still have our own church families and stuff. So that's good that there's a relationship there.
It was a difficult time for those staff members that felt called to go out, and for me and for the staff that was here. But I'd say in God's miraculous way of working, it's all come around, and we're like, thank you, God.
Yeah,
we love each other.
Now you went through. So what year was that the plan?
That was 2013.
So you hired some new staff after that.
Actually, the new plant church was in 2014.
Okay.
We had some staff changes in there and all of that, which also created some of the dynamic of, wow, this isn't what it used to be. And, and then asking certain staff members, part of the dynamic that created some of the tensions was asking staff members to do different roles.
Sure.
And then staff members coming in.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's difficult. I mean, when COVID started, everybody kind of had to shift, right? And we were all tired. We were all stressed out. We're all the unknown. And I remember it being like, Kiki's like, hey, you're going to start helping out with some video editing. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm so bad at it. Like, what are you going to have me do with video editing? And it's just like, no, you got to adjust. This is what you're doing now. And I know John, he didn't get hired as the video guy here.
John Knapp is like a producer, assistant producer.
He's become the production guy, right?
Yeah, so now he's getting our live.
They've been working on that all day.
The live feed, so that when people watch online, they're actually going to watch a live service
instead of pre-recorded, which is another nice thing for us to not have to record, right?
Yeah, because I just did my sermon and it's only Thursday. Give me a break.
Yeah. So we've got there's a lot that happened in 2011 to 2000. I really want to jump to 2017, somewhat selfishly because I was here then, right? Yeah. So you in 2017 you brought on a bunch of people. I came on 2017. John Knapp. Jason, Erica, I'm sure there's somebody else
Some of
somewhere
the
in there.
some of the Club 56 assistant
Yeah,
staff.
yeah. So
And all of
a lot of staff came on around that time. It felt like the church when I got here. There's been so many changes. We've only been here close to 4 years now, and there's been a ton of changes. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that were really standing out to me. First of all, in 2017, we shifted to new small groups.
a whole new
format.
model.
Yeah, whole new model.
Yeah.
What kind of growth did you see with that? Because Kiki often says she wants the church. We want the church to grow smaller and larger at the same time, which I think has really worked with the small group model. So, what kind of change in the church did you see?
I have
when
to
we
give
shifted
I
that?
have to give credit to the staff for really implementing a whole new approach to small groups in the church.
Because there wasn't really a model before that. It was kind of like you wanted to do a study.
Yeah, the model was that we basically came up with what the small groups were going to do and then asked them to do it.
Right, yeah.
And so if people liked what we were saying do, then, they would do it. If they didn't like it, they'd wait for the next offering. So the big switch is this, that now small groups we call them free market small groups. And what that is somebody wants to do a small group, a Bible study of some sort. They want to do a group where there's Bible study and there's walking, or they want to do
or archery. There's an archery group.
We're going to have a prayer group and then
basketball groups,
bows or have bow and arrow. There's knitting,
there's
painting.
There's everything.
So
really is.
we really opened it up with the big vision of let's get people in the church to get to know each other.
Right.
All right. I think our philosophy before was driven by let's get a more Bible study. And we're still doing that, because there's a variety of ways of getting people more Bible study. But I think the new move was let's get people to know each other in this big church. And so our small group attendance basically tripled.
Yeah. It was the first semester I remember doing it, and it was just kind of like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Because I think we had 1,000 people in small groups the first time we did it, which is 2/3 of our church.
Yeah, which is
crazy.
It was crazy.
That's crazy. So the small groups was a big change. Growth Track was another big change.
Yeah, Growth Track
happened.
was really good because we used to have a similar thing to Growth Track.
The Rick Warren thing, right?
The Rick Warren thing, but we weren't offering it every week. That was the big change. All right, so you come to our church this Sunday. We say you can come to Growth Track this afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
And learn everything about our church and get involved and every month. Now that, again, I want to credit the staff for that because it required them and me too, but to be here basically every Sunday night. And then COVID hit and we've been, having to be creative. But that strategy is so good because it gets people involved in the life of the church faster.
Yeah.
And pastors struggle with this. How do we assimilate people? How do we get people connected? Well, you got to have something every week, not every 3 months.
Consistency is something that I've always thought this about the church here too, is that they do so well. And I know that it doesn't come easy to say, hey, we're going to do this every week, because it's a grind to do something every week, in and out. And it's hard to do that. But when I feel like we've got a staff that's all just like on board with it. Like, if we're doing it, we're doing it. Yeah. And I mean, again, I've told you this before, but that speaks to your leadership to just be like, hey, because I'm going to get to this too, but you had 2 Sundays in the 27 years of Spring Hills where you didn't meet. And one of them was because of the flood at the LBC, right?
Yes. Yeah. Back in, that would have been probably 1990. Or something.
I remember here. I mean, I wasn't around for that, but the second one I was around for because it was the Kincaid fire, and we got evacuated mid Saturday night service.
Yes,
and of course you went, well, we'll finish up, and then
then we'll get out of here. All the Nixon
grab
alerts
a corn
were
dog
going off in the auditorium.
Yeah, preaching through that. But so that speaks to the consistency. We don't cancel things unless we're getting evacuated or unless the building is literally flooded. Yeah. I wanted to also, before we get to the real shift in 2017, which was the fires, being on this campus allowed you to do. There was probably a lot of excitement in just the fact that you had a permanent home now, but it allowed you to do outreach in a different way. Now you've got a facility that you can do so many different things on. You've got. We were able to do. When did Christmas Town in Bethlehem start?
Yeah, that started. Eve actually came up with the idea of Christmas Town back. Wow, I wish she was here now. She's better on. It was probably around 2012 12 or
Okay,
pretty
so
early on. It
couple
was
years
like,
after.
we would always we had live nativity scenes for a long time,
Sure.
even when we were over at Luther Burbank Center. But she came up with the idea of Christmas Town. And I still remember the first Christmas Town. It was great.
It's phenomenal.
But now it's like, Macy's department store, crazy, amazing Christmas Town.
When we interviewed here in 2016, it was the Sunday prior to Christmas. And so nothing was set up yet, but stuff was starting to be set up.
Yeah.
So like we walked in and it's like, what are you guys doing over here? Oh, we do Bethlehem and da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And when you guys had said that, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I kind of just picturing like a nativity scene, right? Yeah. Then I saw pictures of it and I'm like, what in the world? How did they pull that off? Because it's legit with the camel and the cow and all the stuff that's out there. It's
I
awesome.
give credit for Eve, my wife, starting it, but then I give tremendous credit to the current staff for like taking it to
some of the King's crew
guys, whole
too.
New level. Yeah, the
Pepe.
Kings. Yeah, Pepe and Mike
May now,
Mike
right?
May now. They built the whole town of Jerusalem. We used to have live nativity. Well, now we built Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, yeah.
And so you get to come and go through Bethlehem before you see
We've
Jesus.
got the acreage. Let's just build the.
We could build
let's keep
the
going.
whole.
Let's expand.
Yeah, we could build the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, the surrounding cities.
There's a long way we can go with that. But beyond the stuff that we did with our church, we've been able to offer our campus to people like Canine Companions does their graduations. Sonoma County Fire did a graduation here. What else?
Sheriff's Department's done training.
The
here.
Trainings with the dogs, canines were here a month ago, I think, doing trainings. So we've been able to do a lot of stuff for the community and be available for those kinds of things, and also some funerals and things like that.
Yeah, we do that really to make a connection with the community. We've had our supervisor have meetings over here.
Yeah.
There have been, county stuff. But we do it to make a connection and hopefully have a relationship with the people we're trying to reach. We don't charge them anything.
Right.
We charge them
Canine
nothing.
Companions, I remember because I run the sound whenever they do those events, and they had mentioned, the director had mentioned, and most of these people, they don't go to church. They're not Christians.
Right.
And again, like we mentioned, this doesn't look like a church necessarily, right? So they're just in a building to them, but they'll always do like a special thank you to Spring Hills. And they said that the money that it saves Canine Companions is able, I forget the exact number, but it basically saves them enough for another like 8 trainings that they're able to do.
Good.
So it's like the amount of donation it is just supplying them a facility to not have to rent one out is huge to them. And that's just a win-win. It's generosity, and it really speaks a lot.
It's a lot of hair in the.
There is a lot of fur.
Dog hair.
A lot of fur. But yeah, I think it's so cool that we're able to not only do some really cool Adventure Week is phenomenal. That we get to do here. We also have the nomadic shelter comes here. So what's that just as far as like the philosophy that you have? You spoke to it a little bit already, but reaching the community, letting them know we're here. Is it, hey, here's our campus, or is it, hey, you know what, we're just going to love on our community in every way we can and try to show you, regardless if you come attend church.
Both of those things. Yeah, it's I think it surprises people when, and I've told people in the community, organizations, you're free to use our property if you need it, you know? And we do funerals, obviously, here and all that kind of thing for people that are not part of the church. Mm-hmm. Certainly you can have your funeral here, and we'd love to help you. And we have volunteers that really reach out. And so it's the whole means. Why do we do it? We really want to reach them for the Lord. That's it. Yeah. So build a friend, or build a relationship, have a friendship, and then, hopefully that leads to them hearing the gospel.
It's been cool because there's been some people I've worked with through some of those that have actually come to like our Christmas events and stuff after they've been on campus, and they know a few people here like, oh yeah, we'll come. I mean, I think it was 2017 when we did Drummer Boy. And it was like, I said, hey, come check out the Christmas service, because we're doing this really cool Drummer Boy opening thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. And I'm like, yeah, they probably won't be here. And I saw them there. And it was so cool to actually be like, hey, you came and checked it out.
It was legit.
It was fun. Hey, I saw that there's some churches that will they'll bring something back a few years later because they can do it better. And I'm like, let's do it again. I think we could do it even better. I want to go back to now 2017 specifically, because the fires happened in 2017. The experience of that, I don't know that anybody could say that they'd experienced something like that. That night was, I I mean, it was scary. Now I was not in an area that was in the immediate danger, but I was pretty close and nobody knew, right? We didn't know.
Right.
I saw it coming down the hill and I'm like, I just got to get out of here. And I talked to you the next morning. So you've been here now 25 years at this point with Spring Hills. The pastor that had come to this county, you planted a church. You've been through ups and downs with the church. But what was that day like for you, that morning, waking up, or not even waking up necessarily because you've been awake, but just knowing that the Tubbs fire literally ripped through the city. You didn't know if your house had been hit.
Right. Our house.
I don't think we knew if the church had been hit.
Right.
I wasn't sure
Right.
what time we found out that the church was okay. But yeah, what was that day like for you as a pastor? Worrying about.
I mean, people talked about like it felt apocalyptic. You know? It really did.
It did. It was
apocalypse.
It was like a movie. It was
a bomb
crazy.
hit, a nuclear bomb or something, and it was very sobering in a sense of we need to lead people to Christ. We need to. It was sobering, and at the same time, the Spirit was almost saying, we need to get the gospel out like crazy. And I remember some of the messages I gave around that time was saying that I believe that God allowed it to get people's attention. It's like, what is it going to take for people to stop and consider the good news of the gospel and pay attention to it and listen to it? Now we got COVID-19, right? Which the only thing I could say about that is I believe it's in God's grace, the same thing. The church is sort of in some states like ours is being put on hold and changing, but all the while I think people are thinking about their, eternity,
right.
Thinking about how temporary life really is.
Right.
So that was the case. I was like, oh God, when are you coming? Are you coming soon? That's what it felt like.
It was, no, I know it. That was, I remember driving, because I drove back to Modesto that morning. I hadn't really talked, I think I talked to Erica, and Erica said, we think the Knapp's apartment was hit up on Fountain Grove. We think Brett and Eve's house was hit because Coffee Park was hit. The church, somebody had driven by the church, saw the church was okay. And I was like, I called you and I'm like, hey, and you were like, Garett, how's it going? I'm like, how are you this chipper right now? You literally didn't know if your house had burned down, right? And so like, I was just that calmed me down right away just because I was still new here. My family wasn't with me. They had already been out of town. So like I did all that by myself that night before. My brother called me. He's like, I booked you a hotel in San Ramon and like get over there and just get away, that kind of thing. And I just remember driving back to Modesto, to where my family was, and just thinking like, what are we going to do now? Like, what if the church did get hit? What's the next step? How is this going to be, and it felt like a lot of pressure. And then like 2 days later, sat in here in this green room with you guys, and you just said, okay, well, this is going to be the new normal. And here we go. We're having services this weekend. What's it going to look like? Let's start figuring it out. We fed people meals, and, it was just like right away. It was just like, my own personality is like, I'll freak out a little bit and be like, I don't know what to do here. So the fact that, again, the leadership being like, hey, okay, this is our situation. Let's figure it out. Solve the problem. Solve enough problems. And we got more people coming to Christ, like that kind of thing.
I wonder if our church, we had 2017. That was really crazy. Then 2019, we evacuated again.
Yeah, and that fire wasn't far from here.
Here we are, 2020, evacuations again.
4 months after the evacuation.
In the midst of COVID.
It's just crazy.
It has been,
crazy.
It'd be nice to have about 5 years of just normalcy.
Yeah. All right, so this year in March, COVID hit, and all of a sudden, we've got our third Sunday where we don't get to meet, and that was March, I forget the date, but Teach Us to Pray. That was our series that we were going through. And I remember Saturday night happened. We got the text, I think, Sunday morning around, 4:30 or 5 a.m. And Kiki said, all right, no service today. We're going to stream it. So now, what's your thought? Pastor Bret, here we go. COVID. What were you thinking right
and
at
I'm
first?
thinking, okay, we can do this for a couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll be back Easter.
Yeah.
Which would have been, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, away from when we.
Yeah, March.
When
I
it
want
was
to say March
announced that
16th.
we're shutting down the whole country.
Right.
And churches are not allowed. Shelter in place.
Right.
Shelter in place. So I thought it was going to last a couple of weeks. And it's still going on.
It's amazing. I can't believe it.
No,
now,
is
Easter,
crazy.
that was a lot of fun, though. That ended up being, there's some cool stats that came out about how many people got to see, got to basically hear the gospel because of the online community. Now, obviously, you can't, we talked about the church as essential. We've talked about how being the church doesn't happen online. You can't be the church online. You need to be in person. So what's been the biggest challenge for you as a pastor of a church, and not just a pastor of a church, but as a Christian, dealing with COVID over the last 8 months?
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge for me has been just trusting God with it. I mean, what's happening
I know.
to the church, and my fellow pastors who are doing online services. Some churches are basically, they're smaller churches and they're just using iPhones,
I know.
and Facebook Live, basically. And so it's, I think, trusting that God knows what he's doing and he doesn't need my help. It's like, this is not the way it's supposed to be at all.
Feel like Moses a little bit, like, God, I can't do this. No, I'm going to do it. You're just going to be my hands and my feet while I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting when the Israelites came out of Egypt and they were free and they're making their way to the promised land, they're attacked by the Amalekites. That would have been one of those things like, what's going on? We were just delivered. And now we got these Amalekites attacking us. So the sovereignty of God and the way God works, I'll just say, sometimes it's really clear. You just see it.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, it's almost like a test of faith. And this feels like a test of faith.
What have been some of the things that you've seen happen over the last 8 months that you've been really uplifted by? Let's be optimistic for a minute instead of being pessimistic.
Have to?
I know it's hard to be, right? But what are some of the good things that you've seen come out of this?
Well, I love seeing the kind of staff we have. I love that. That's like really encouraged me that they've responded. They've taken on different roles. They're not complaining.
And that you hear. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. But that they want to go full bore, but they are adapting and trying to make things better given our circumstances. I mean, our technical side of things, I think, is improving, and so coming out of this, are we going to come out of this?
I know, right?
Coming out of this will be better at our broad outreach. I mean, even our presence on social media has gone way up.
Yeah.
And so we can encourage people with Bible verses or videos or your podcasts.
This was a product of COVID.
Yeah, this is we got podcasts going now. People can, there's plenty of sources for them to be encouraged. So all of that is really good. And then I know when this sort of resolves, if I can put it that way, when it resolves, we will all see God's hand and our faith will grow even more.
Yeah. I think for me, the big thing that happened was Adventure Week, when we were so bummed at first that we weren't going to be able to do it. Because it's the funnest week of the year for me. Now, I get to literally drive around on the golf cart and throw water balloons at kids. But the fact that it was going to be online was, at first, kind of a gut punch. Like, oh my gosh, like the kids don't get to be on campus. They already missed the last, 2 months of school. These poor kids, like my heart just goes out to them, right? But then I think it was the Sunday night before we started, and we had the boxes with all the crafts and stuff in it. And we had 200 or 300 boxes left that people didn't pick up at the pickup times. And we just decided we're just going to go drop them all off. Let's go to these addresses. So I think there was a team of us, maybe 10 people that just took different chunks of areas. And at the very first house that I dropped it off at, I get to the door, she answers it, and I'm like, hey, I'm from Spring Hills. We're doing Adventure Week starting tomorrow. You signed your kids up for it, so here's the boxes with the shirts and stuff. And it was like, she immediately just starts crying. She's like, I missed the pickup time. I felt so bad because my kids were going to miss out on it. So just knowing that we were able to do that. Now, it was one of those things where I'm like, now this mom also gets to be a part of it. Because normally the parents aren't on campus.
Right.
But now they get to see their kids enjoy it. I think we got to meet live outside right after that, but I was really uplifted by the fact that, you know what, the kids already enjoy it, but now the parents get to be a part of it too.
And you saw that, and I think we'll see a lot of that kind of thing where you're like, God, you worked, God, you brought new people to church, God, you did this in our staff, God, you made us aware of how important it is to preach the gospel, sort of like the feeling I had during the Kincaid fire. I mean, we're going to see a lot of those. We're amazed at you, God. So coming out of this, I think the church is going to be more passionate than ever.
I want to ask you about missions as well, because we do a lot of mission support. You shared recently that we were able to help in Vietnam. I forget his name. the pastor get a vehicle where he's able to drive all over Vietnam. However many miles, I always forget how many miles you said it was, but he's driving on a moped, and now he's got a vehicle. And Spring Hills, because of the generosity of the people in our church, we've been able to help purchase him a car. So what are the kind of missions that your heart went out to Vietnam? I know we've supported them for a while. What other kind of missions has Spring Hills supported, and what's the reason we chose Vietnam? And what's his name?
John Bentley.
John Bentley with
Harmony Outreach. Yeah. And missions is something that Spring Hills in the latter years here has grown in. You know, when you start a church, you are the mission, right? You're trying to start it. And then we got so caught up in finding property and getting our church. Okay, well now that we're quote unquote, we have our home
stable
as a church stable. Yes.
As stable as you can.
We're doing more and more with missions, which I'm excited about. So in Vietnam, there's a pastor there, a couple of pastors that we support. We support a seminary, as you call it there, a seminary, and that allows for Vietnamese pastors in the hill countries, men and women from Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, all the way to Hanoi. I mean, they come for training, and I've been there a couple of years to do theological training through a translator, and I just love that. It's so fun to do.
Is that pretty much like any other experience you've ever had?
Yeah, I mean that's the best.
Is it humbling?
Oh yeah, because the students are so sharp it blows your mind. I mean, I remember teaching through the the Roman Empire as a background in the New Testament and going through all the different Caesars. And I missed one, and one of the students pointed that out to me, and I was like, "Oh boy, wish I had done my homework a little better." But also with our mission work, we're focused on what's called the 1040 window, and it's
what's the 1040 window?
It's 10 degrees north of the equator, up to 40 degrees north of the equator. The little section there that goes really from North Africa over to in China and Vietnam. That little section. The reason why we give money there and do that is because it's very under-resourced. There's a lot of money that goes into missions in South America, Mexico, some places in Europe, but there's very few that go in the 1040 window. It's because, Hindus, it includes India. Hindus are very unreached. Muslims, in North Africa and up through the Middle East are very unreached. Certainly Buddhists going over to Vietnam are very unreached. So that's where we just feel, okay, let's give money there.
Yeah. There was I had a friend that went over to Gabon, Africa for a couple years, and him and his family were the first ones to go over there in like 15 years or something. Yeah. And him sharing with me about the fact that it's because it's dangerous. It's not a safe place to be. Yeah. And so it's hard to get the right kind of funding or whatever. I mean, I've never been on these missions trips. Over, as you know, I don't like getting on planes. Yeah. So getting me on a plane for that long.
You're on a plane for a long time.
It's fascinating to hear just some of the things, the people that are unreached and why they're not. So Vietnam, knowing that this pastor can now drive all over, was really cool to hear about that.
Yeah, and in India, we sponsor a village that seeks to lead kids to Christ and get them out of sex trafficking. Yeah. They're so poor that their parents have to, have their kids dance. It's called, they were trying to get them out of that. Yeah. Lead them to Christ, provide an alternative for them. And then we also support a church planting and seminary training effort in Kenya, Africa too. So
Spring Hills is very active.
Yeah,
in
locally,
supporting,
the pregnancy counseling center in town, helping women understand and have a place to go instead of abortion, to consider, the life that's in them. And
Royal Family Kids,
the Rebel Gospel Mission. Youth for Christ, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, a lot of different things.
I interviewed Jess and Brennan the other day. For InterVarsity. So right. I interviewed her, so I'm going to throw that on the podcast next week.
Yeah. So anyway, I would love to triple and quadruple our missions giving. Yeah. And Lord willing, that'll happen over there. As we finish paying off the property, then we can just take all that money and
throw it at
missions.
Cool.
Oh, so good.
So what's next, man? We're here in 2020. We don't know. Obviously, that's a question we don't know. But in your mind, just like looking forward, let's say the next 5 years, what are you looking for with Spring Hills Church?
Well, we get through COVID, we get back to normal, and Spring Hills, like a laser beam, disciples people, teaches them Scripture, and reaches out to the community. I think all with the attitude of Christ is coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's laser focus, work as hard as we can. Sort of like this. Could this be a wake up call, and then Spring Hills wakes up?
Yeah.
I mean, not that we've been asleep, but I'm just saying more laser focused, disciple making passion.
Yeah.
Hopefully
in the whole community.
Yeah.
Or the world, man. I mean, like, this is not just this is one thing that, when we went through the fires and stuff, it was very local. We were like, this is what we're going through. And this is all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, people are dealing with this stuff all over.
And I think the church, like a sleeping giant or something, will rise up. And maybe it'll be the biggest evangelistic effort in the history of the world before Christ comes.
Yeah, cool. Bret, anything else you want to share about the story? Anything I missed?
Oh, I'm sure there's a bunch of details that if Eve was here,
she could fill in some spots.
But anyway, to anybody listening, God is faithful.
Yeah.
God is able. Nothing's impossible with God. And even when we make mistakes, God in his grace turns it around for good.
Yeah. Well, there was Story of Spring Hills in a nutshell, I guess. I mean, a total of what, 2 hours worth of stuff. So there's obviously a lot more to it, but we wanted to give you a taste of what it's been like for Bret and Eve in 28 years now for you, almost 29,
years, yeah.
Almost 29 of the Spring Hills existence. So that was the story of Spring Hills. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll do more of these kind of series. I'm not sure what yet. I'm open to ideas, so you can always come up to me at church and say, hey, do a series on whatever. And then I'll consider it. So, all right, everybody, thank you. Bret, thanks for taking the time to do this over the last few weeks.
Thank you, Garett.
And thank Eve for me, even though she couldn't be here for part 4.